So today we're going to talk a little bit about process control and what DCOM does to bring that to our batch and process-based manufacturing customers. So we talked about in another video the concept of the single system and how avoiding bolt-on systems will allow you to have better process control. So today we're going to take that conversation a little bit deeper and talk about the actual processes that our customers are going through and how that single system model impacts that. So when we talk about process control around DCOM, we always talk about the formulation to shipment process. This is really the process that batch and process-based manufacturers need to control to assure that they're going to do what they say they're going to do for their customers. So we're going to put some boxes up on the board. We're going to walk through what that means and what the control points are and how you can ensure that you're doing what you say you're going to do. So this whole process starts when I create a formulation. So the formulation is where I'm going to specify how an item is actually made, what goes into it, what the physical properties are of that, what the QC requirements are. All the information about all the items that go into a product is contained in the formulation. That formulation is going to drive your MRP process along with a number of other inputs. So MRP stands for Material Requirements Planning, and that's going to tell you what I need to buy in order to have the materials on hand at the proper time to go through my process. So in order to properly drive MRP, that requires a lot of inputs. It requires information from your sales or forecasting of what I've actually sold and what I plan to sell over the next period of time, what I currently have on inventory, including anything which might be stuck in QC. And it has to take the formulation and explode through the sales forecast or sales orders and tell me all the way down to the low-level raw materials what I need on hand to do that. So the formulation in the MRP process is going to drive my PO process, which is going to drive into the PO receipt process. So when I receive a purchase order, this is my first process control stage, is that tied into that purchase order are going to be individual items that I'm going to receive. Tied into the items at both the item master level and the QC specs level is going to tell me what do I need to do when I receive this item? Which of those items that I've bought have to go through QC, and what QC must it go through? Certain items are going to bypass this process and go right into work. So if I buy a box, for instance, a lot of our customers just take boxes and put it right into production. They'll do a visual check, say, okay, yeah, I see that, put it in there. But most of our customers, when you get down to the raw material level, need to do some physical tests to make sure that the product is as their vendor said it was going to be. So this becomes your first process check, is this QC hold. So after I receive this product, it goes into the QC hold process. And this is a point where I need to know that we're going to do that. If I were to bypass this, I'm putting the process at risk. So typically it comes into here. There are times when people, if you get behind in production, maybe you have somebody new in this process, they might try to bypass that. So what we've done from DCOM is engineer a process where we can stop that process if you don't do what you say you're going to do. So the first opportunity to stop that is after it comes through QC hold, I'm going to issue material to production. I'm going to do that by means of our WMS systems, warehouse management system. The WMS system are scanner guns, which I'm going to take materials and I'm going to scan them into production. So the idea is the WMS system, because we have this single system, the WMS system knows about the QC process. And so if I try to scan an item which has not been through the QC process, it's going to stop me. It's not going to allow that. So that's the first check we have in this process to make sure that we've done this QC hold process. So again, if I'm running late on production and there's a lot of pressure for me to get this batch done, maybe I have a new employee, they might try to bypass this. They go to the loading dock and say, okay, yeah, I see that product, I'm going to use it, even though it hasn't gone through the QC process. That's putting your batch at risk. It's putting all the other materials that I've mixed into that batch process at risk also. So it's a chance for a problem. We've put our first hold in that process to control that process. So the next step in this process is after it's been issued to production, I'm actually going to finish production. In the DCOM system, we have controls built into this process. So again, let's think for a second, and let's think that people have totally bypassed the process that we set up, and they took something from the PO receipt process and put it right into production. They bypassed QC hold. They could have even bypassed the issue to production. If they physically take a bag and dump it into the tank without doing any of these steps, we have another step built in here to control this. So we built into the controls into the finish process. And say, for instance, if I'm finishing a batch that has 5,000 pounds in it, you can set a tolerance, a percentage tolerance to say, how much of the materials must I have issued to this batch to allow me to finish it? The reason we have a percentage tolerance is because in the batch and process world, there are oftentimes yields where I'm not necessarily going to get out exactly what I put into that batch. So each of our customers, and for different products, you can set a different tolerance and say, what is my tolerance level to get out of that? So if I'm going to make a 5,000 pound batch, and I find out I only issued 2,000 pounds of that, for instance, it might stop that process. So again, this is another checkpoint that says if I've bypassed this, if my people have chosen to bypass this, they didn't do what we said we were going to do, they will allow them another chance to get that. So the next process after we finish production is it's going to go into another QC hold. So our first QC hold was for raw materials. Our second QC hold is for actually our finished goods. So we've taken these raw materials, we've combined them together, we've done the magic that we do, and we've produced a finished good. Now we again want to put this into a QC hold phase, and we want to make sure that the physical properties of this finished good actually match what we expected it to match. Again, it's another check. If I had messed up any of these processes, by doing this QC hold, we should find that process. Now, most of our customers actually do this pretty well. They talk about the 4 o'clock problem, is we go through this process all the time. At 4 o'clock, the truck shows up on our loading dock, and the truck driver's in a hurry, and he says, I need you to load this product onto the truck. And they say, well, it's in QC hold. He goes, well, I'm going to leave. They feel a lot of pressure to load up the truck. So the problem is, if I bypass this, I bypass one of my major controls. There's another control in this, which is the document generation process. So out of DCOM, again, we have that single system concept. The document generation tools are built into DCOM. So in order to load up the truck, I'm going to need a series of documents. It might be a bill of lading, it can be a C of A document, a packing list. If this is an international shipment, you might need a pro forma invoice. All those documents are going to come out of the DCOM system. And so that's my control that I've done all these processes. In the DCOM system, because we have this single system, I'm not able to generate a document unless all the other processes have been done. And so the idea is that I've set up processes, I say this is what we're going to do, and most of the time we do it. As your company grows, as you get new people into that process, sometimes there's a tendency to bypass some of these processes and procedures. DCOM has built in multiple stage gates to control that process. So the last step of this is when this product goes off to our customer and potentially the end user. So sometimes our customer or our customer's customer is the end user. Sometimes that customer is going to ship that product off to their end user. This is not the place to find a QC issue. If I've had any problems in my process, it can be found there, and this is not the time to do this. So the idea is in DCOM is we have multiple stops where we can control that process and we can force the process to do what you say you're going to do. And even if there are breakdowns in that process and people violate those processes, there are subsequent stage gates to stop it. The final one being the document generation. If you haven't done everything right, the document generation, because it's part of the DCOM system, is going to stop that process. So at the end of the day, this formulation to shipment process is why DCOM exists.